Welcome to Season 3 of the Guardians of Hope podcast. We are a community of parents, educators, health, legal, and tech experts dedicated to positively impacting children's lives. The thoughts and opinions of my guests are not my own. This is a platform for sharing. Welcome, everyone. Food insecurity isn't just a statistic. It's a mother choosing between feeding her children and paying rent. It's a senior skipping meals to afford medication. It's a working family relying on a food bank despite having two jobs. And right now, millions of Americans are facing an even more dire reality. SNAP benefits have been delayed or not distributed this month due to the government shutdown, leaving families without their primary source of food assistance. But here's what most people don't understand. Food insecurity isn't just about hunger. It's linked to housing instability, healthcare access, educational barriers, and economic opportunity. You can't solve one without addressing the others. Today, we're joined by Tammy Johnson, Executive Director and founder of Empowering the Masses, to discuss the national food insecurity crisis, why Texas leads the nation in this devastating metric, and what's happening right now as the SNAP benefit disruption pushes vulnerable families to the breaking point. Welcome, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you please share with us why you founded Empowering the Masses?
Empowering the Masses was born out of my own lived experiences. My sisters and I grew up in poverty with our mom, who was a single parent, but was experiencing quite a bit of health issues and health challenges. And so she did not have the ability to work in order to provide for our families. And so my sister and I often depended on the school for our lunches, breakfast, snacks, and things of that nature. And so when you get to some semblance of whatever success looks like for you in your life, and somebody's giving you a hand up along the way, I feel like nothing ever happens to you, it happens for you. And so all my lived experiences, I felt like needed to be poured into an organization that can help people that were just like me.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I'm really thrilled that you're here because we have a lot to talk about. Why don't we start with the national picture before we go into talking about Texas? Now, over 44 million Americans experience food insecurity. And with SNAP benefits being delayed or not distributed this month due to the government shutdown, we're seeing a crisis within a crisis. What are you and other food security organizations across the country witnessing right now as families lose access to this critical safety net?
Families are becoming desperate. They're trying to figure out how am I going to make the ends meet. A lot of families didn't prepare or didn't believe that this would happen, like SNAP benefits wouldn't actually be paid so that people can make sure they can provide their basic need of sustenance for their families. And so just for us, even just last Saturday, we typically serve about 500 families a week. We serve 745. And so we're seeing an increased number for our needs, and people panicking because they didn't think to stock their shelves. And, most of the time they don't have enough SNAP benefits to even do that.
Now, Texas holds the unfortunate distinction ranking of number one in the nation for food insecurity. For listeners across America who may be dealing with the issue in their own states, can you help us understand what food insecurity actually looks like on the ground and what specific factors make Texas the most vulnerable state among other states?
One of the things that makes Texas, vulnerable is because we have a lot of food deserts. I know people refer to them as food deserts, but I call them food apartheids. And we are, because those things are done on purpose. It's strategically done with the way that grocery stores are placed in communities, and people having access to those grocery stores that provide the ability to either get to food on a regular basis if you're lacking transportation. Because most of the times when you're in a food desert, you don't have the transportation that you need to get to a grocery store. You can't walk to your local grocery store. It's not in walking distance. You may have to catch 2 or 3 buses to get there. And so sometimes people are going to go without. And so what people end up doing is having to go to their local convenience store that's right there near them, right there in the area. and they're having to make a choice between, am I going to pick something that's healthy for my family, or am I going to pick something that's affordable? And so when I get to that local food mart corner
Mm-hmm.
store, I'm not, if they have bananas and they have milk, but the milk may be $8 a gallon and bananas maybe $3 for one banana, but they have top ramen, or they have Takis or something like that that I can pay $5 for. That's what I'm gonna get for my family. So food insecurity, lack of access to healthy, nutritious foods, but also the inability to afford it or get to it regularly, even if I have SNAP.
Understood. Now, at Empowering the Masses, you've moved beyond the traditional food bank model to address what you call the root causes of poverty. We talked about this: housing, health, education, and employment. Can you explain why this holistic approach matters, and why can't emergency food relief alone solve this crisis, regardless of what state you're in?
Because I experienced that myself when I grew up in poverty. And I knew that we were in poverty because my mom just simply didn't have the physical ability to go to work and take care of us. But at the age of 14, I had the opportunity to go to work for an organization called Private Industry Council, which allowed students or children, teenagers, you had to be 14 and up, 14 to like 18, to participate in this summer job program. And I went through training and we got to work for the summer, and I realized, I put two and two together, that the ability to work and take care of myself put me in a position of self-sustainability. I just needed to have the tools and the resources and the doors open for me in order for me to be self-sustainable. And I never looked back. None of my children, I have six of them, have ever experienced food insecurity because I was introduced to a paradigm of excellence and a way to take care of my family,
Hmm.
outside of depending upon governmental assistance. Now, my mom, was a very smart woman, but she just physically couldn't do it. And so I knew that food insecurity was the root cause of something bigger. And if we just stop at addressing food insecurity, you're just putting a band-aid over a bullet hole. You got to figure out how to stop the bleeding. So you got to figure that upstream method. Why are people experiencing food insecurity, and how can I help them get to a place of self-sustainability? And most often it's short-term training, because a lot of time our people are not just food insecure, living in poverty, they have time poverty. Because just because I'm food insecure doesn't mean I'm not working. I'm just not, the ends are not meeting. I may be working 70 hours a week, two jobs, and it's still not enough. So how do we put people who have time poverty, physical poverty, in a place of self-sustainability? And so I thought about short-term trainings that I knew could lead to long-term results.
Hmm. And you talk about time poverty. Can you explain a little bit more in detail what that is like? It's so you're saying, and this is something we're seeing, all over the news, where people are being criticized for being or using supplemental services, but they don't have the time because they are working and they aren't just making ends meet. So can you talk a little bit more about that, Tammy?
Time poverty. Think about an average single mom who's receiving SNAP benefits. And SNAP benefits are not for people who are not taking care of themselves. They're doing their best. SNAP
Mhm.
benefits are supposed to be a bridge, and that's what a lot of people are using them for. I may work 70 hours a week. I may work at a warehouse delivering packages 40 hours a week. But then I may end up having to come home because it's still not enough money to make the ends meet, and do Uber for 4 hours a day, 3 or 4 days a week. That's 70 hours. I'm working two jobs. It's still not enough. And so I have to depend on the SNAP benefits to kind of bridge that gap so that I can make sure the lights are on, so I can make sure the rent is paid. And so if I'm working 70 hours a week, not every 2 weeks, every week,
Mhm.
that's 140 hours every 2 weeks, and I still don't have enough to provide um, in a holistic way for my family. Do I have a lot of time now to think about my education and into some type of job training that's going to help me with this? I don't. And so when we were designing our workforce development, we were trying to figure out, how can we do something that's can be done in 12 weeks or 16 weeks or less, where our community can be self-sustainable on the other side of it, because we know that people are often working multiple jobs trying to take care of their children. And then think about, with that 70 hours, 140 hours every 2 weeks, and if the ends can't meet for me to pay for groceries, the ends are not meeting for me to provide daycare either for my children. So like, there's just so many moving pieces that contribute to food insecurity. I got to pay the rent, first.
Exactly. You have the rent to pay. You have to pay someone to watch your child while you're working. There are a lot of moving parts, like you said. Now, your organization helps. in a way that other programs don't. You have a workforce development program that you provide phlebotomy and community health worker certifications, and there may be others that I haven't covered, but tell us about this model and why equipping someone with the job skills alongside the food assistance creates a sustainable change.
That's that upstream method that I mentioned before. And if you ever heard of the upstream story where there were some fishermen fishing and people were falling into the water, and one of the fishermen was like, I'm gonna, he was pulling people out. One of them was pulling people out of the water, putting them on a boat with them. And one of the fishermen was like, I'm gonna go upstream to figure out like what's happening. And the other fisherman was like, no, stay here. I need you to help me pull the people out of the water. He was like, no, I need to go figure out why they're falling in the water in the first place.
Mm,
And so in Empowering the Masses, our formula is education plus advocacy equals empowerment. If we can educate our communities and provide them with a way to educate themselves, teach them how to advocate for themselves, then they walk away empowered. And so that's where that short-term job training comes in. If I can teach you how to be employable and not just teach you the hard skills of the trade that we're providing for you and the certification, but the soft skills is going to keep you employed, because we can teach you the hard skills and you can get employed, but if we don't marry that with the soft skills, you're not going to remain employed, and it's going to be this cycle of poverty, over and over again. And so
mhm.
if you educate your community in all aspects as much as you can, the possibility of them being self-sustainable increases. And I have we have a story with Akira, who was one of our students, and she was on SNAP when she started out with us in the fall cohort of 2024. And Akira is a young woman, so she had the ability to work, but she just wasn't making enough money because she didn't, have a college degree. She didn't have a certification, so she was working two jobs. And she found out about our phlebotomy training program, and she heard that it was 12 weeks, and she's working two jobs, and she's like, I want to go to this training, but it's 2 days a week and it's in the evening. If I quit one of my jobs and I can pay my rent, but I can't buy groceries for myself, then I'm going to have to apply for SNAP. Okay, I'm going to do it. And so she did it. She finished the top of our class and she graduated. And then about 4 weeks after graduation, she was able to get a job at a local hospital making $27 an hour. She called up the SNAP people and was like, hey, the Department of Health and Human Services, I don't need SNAP anymore because now I'm gainfully employed. That was an example of what SNAP is supposed to be there for. It's not people just sitting around waiting on the check or waiting on benefits to hit a card. It's people really trying to figure out how to do this thing called life in these crazy times.
Yeah, that's a great story, Tammy. Thank you for sharing that example.
Mhm.
It might inspire other people and other listeners in America, across the country, whether they're in states with high food insecurity like Texas, Mississippi, Louisiana, or with lower rates. There's still a significant need. How can individuals, like policymakers, employers, and communities, create a real impact in addressing this issue where they live?
One of the things I think is get out of the office and go to the people who are doing the work, that are the boots on the ground, and
Mhm.
really collect real world stories and figure out who your constituents are if you're a policymaker, and find out who you are there to serve and who you're there making policies for, and let them be a part of the conversation, so that when you're making policies, everybody who the policy will affect is at the table, right? And then if you're not a policymaker, that's that education plus advocacy equals empowerment piece. Get involved in your community. And you don't have to be at the policymaker level, but go to your city council meetings. Go to your local organizations and find out how you can advocate on behalf of them about the work that they're doing. Like, if we're better together, we're more alike than we're different. And I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. At the
Mhm.
end of the day, we all have to eat. We all have to live our best lives. And if one of us is not good, then none of us are as good as we can be. So don't worry about which side of the aisle you're sitting on. Like, worry about how are we impacting humankind, and get involved with your constituents.
Mhm. And what about employers and individuals just like me? What can we do?
Employers, find out what's happening with your staff, because some of your staff is experiencing food insecurity as well. Some of
Mhm.
them get up early in the morning at 6 a.m. and go to their local food pantry, take the food box back home, and then come to work and sit next to you in the cubicle, and you never know. So make
Mhm.
sure you get to know your staff and figure out like, if they're not making what a living wage looks like, how can I? And I know me as an employer know sometimes our resources are limited, but get a pulse on what's happening with the people that work for you, that's helping move your mission forward, and then if you are an individual, not an employer, and you have some free time, like me at Empowering the Masses, we need human capital. We need people to help us serve, at the food pantry on a Saturday, even during the week, to help a couple of hours with the neighbors who are coming in the market to shop. So you don't have to have $1 million to help. Just find out what's really, put a pulse, your hand to a pulse of what's happening in your community.
Mhm. It's great.
Mhm.
Tammy, how is your organization funded and how can people help you? Where can they find you?
We're on empoweringthemasses.org. We are community funded, and um, yeah, we do our best. But people can find us at empoweringthemasses.org, you know, um, and support us that way. Get to know about us, volunteer with us. There's lots of volunteer opportunities, especially as we go into the holiday season and we don't know what's going to look like. We know our lines are going to they're long. Like I said, we're normally at 500 families a week. Last week was 745.
Hmm.
So if this continues, it's going to just, we know it's going to continue to increase.
Okay. Tammy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this issue. And I hope that this continues to spark momentum in the positive direction.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks.